Hello and welcome to Masala History. A few days back, one of my friends asked me to tell an outrageous history. And in today's episode of Masala History, or perhaps I should call this episode as Garam Masala History, I am narrating the story I told her for everyone's benefit. The story incidentally starts at the now infamous city of Wuhan on December 17th, 1944. At this time, the hero of our story, Second Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda, was a Japanese expat working for the Tajima Yoko Trading Company in Hankou in China. Hankou is modern-day Wuhan. On the fateful day of December 17th, 1944, he was called up by the Imperial Japanese Army to serve in the Philippines. An intelligence officer trained by the government in guerrilla warfare, he was deployed to the garrison at Lubang Island, a forgettable island which was located between the strategically important islands of Mindoro and Luzon. His orders, handed down by his commanding officer, Major Takashi Taniguchi, were simple. You are absolutely forbidden to die by your own hand. It may take 3 years, it may take 5, but whatever happens, we will come back for you. Until then, so long as you have one soldier, you are to continue to lead him. You may have to live on coconuts, you may have to live on bananas. If that's the case, live on coconuts, live on bananas. Under no circumstance are you to give up your life voluntarily. Little did Major Takahashi Taniguchi know what impact his words were going to create. In the early 1945, literally weeks after Lieutenant Onoda was deployed, the American forces barged into Luzon and then into Manila, giving Lubang Island a complete pass. When a reconnaissance force landed in Lubang Island, though, Lieutenant Onoda and his forces retreated into the island's mountainous interior to resist and wait for Japanese reinforcements. By then, the Second World War had started going in the favor of the Allies already, and it was a matter of time for the inevitable end of Germany and Japan. Italy had already switched sides and joined the Allies, and the US had taken over the islands invaded by Japan. In August 1945, the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs in the city of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. The Japanese Empire surrendered unconditionally days later. The Second World War came to an end, or so we thought. But Onoda and his men fought on, even after the war had ended. They were truly loyal and gave more than 100% to their job. They fought the locals, burned the lands, ignoring every single flyer deployed by the American planes, notifying them that the war was over. In Onoda's eyes, anything that was not Japanese was no good, so he kept resisting, telling all his companions that all of this must be cunning ploys by the American enemy to cull them out of the jungle. Living inside the jungle like a rebel must have been no fun for Onoda and his companions. They would march during the day looking out for any signs of the enemy and for crops to burn. At night, they would guard their camp in shifts. It was not until 1949 that one of the troops decided to break the death before surrender pact and actually surrendered. When he surrendered, the Japanese government realized what was going on in the Philippine Lubang Islands. So multiple attempts were made by both the Japanese and the US governments to draw out the soldiers, but it was all in vain, as Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda kept suspecting every attempt as a pathetic tactic by the enemy. The governments did their best, along with the local Philippine police, to locate this crazy fighter and his troops. They even killed one of his troops, but he continued to hold out. By May 1954, Onoda was left with just one more soldier on his side. In 1959, the Japanese government made a last effort to draw the remaining soldiers hiding throughout the Pacific. This time, letters and pictures from the missing soldiers' families were dropped, along with a personal note from the Japanese emperor himself. On the last day of their attempt, Hiroo Onoda's own brother Toshio was on speaker asking him to come out and surrender. He even sang a song that they had learned together at high school. Those of you who have seen the Bollywood classic Yadon Ki Bharat can now finally realize where the idea of a family song perhaps came from. Anyway, when Hiroo Onoda heard his brother's voice, he was a little convinced. But there has to be an anticlimax. When he heard how the singer was struggling with high notes, he concluded that the US government had actually put a very bad impersonator to get him to come out. He went back into the jungle again. As years passed, the Japanese people started to think of Onoda as a made-up story. An explorer by the name Suzuki set out in 1974 to search for Lieutenant Onoda, a panda, and the abominable snowman in that particular order. Suzuki was actually successful in finally meeting Onoda, who since 1972 was just a one-man army. Everyone had either fled or had died. When Suzuki explained to him what was happening in the world, Onoda would not believe that the war was over. He insisted that as a soldier, he needed to receive instructions from his superior officer so that he could actually come out. Suzuki returned to Japan with photos of himself and Onoda and relayed this message. Onoda's superior officer during the World War II, Major Taniguchi, now a bookseller, was spotted, and he traveled to Lubang Islands to meet with Onoda and issue the instructions that the lieutenant had been waiting for. After hearing the surrender orders from his major, Lieutenant Onoda finally decided to surrender. In his formal surrender to Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos, Onoda wore his 30-year-old Imperial Army uniform, cap, and sword, all of which were in excellent condition. Later, President Marcos pardoned him for all the killings he had done. Onoda returned to Japan in 1974, approximately 29 years after the end of World War II. His home country welcomed him as a celebrity, as a hero. Onoda was awarded large sums of money by the Japanese government. But the true loyal soldier that he was, he donated all of the money to a temple. Hiroo Onoda visited the Lubang Island in Philippines again in 1996. He donated US dollars 10,000 to the local school there, and thankfully this time he did not stay for long. Such is the outrageous history of the lone soldier who kept fighting his World War II for 30 years after it formally ended. Hope you all had fun listening to this unbelievable but true story. Send in your feedback and comments as always. Stay safe and talk to you soon in the next edition. Take care.